Incremental greetings. This is Glenn Palau, the host of Endless Schools Library podcast. Today we have the sixth episode, the second episode with Tyler Albright. And today we will openly talk about his own experience, how he discovered free learning, and what he did before that.
We just want education freedom. Education freedom.
Hello?
Hello. It's good to see you again.
Yeah. Do you want to self-introduce quickly for people who didn't see the last episode?
For sure. Hi, I'm Tyler. I guess currently I'm working on a community-based learning platform in Taiwan to try to spread and give more optionality to how people receive education here. I've been free learning I would say I've probably been free learning for 5 or 6 years, but I've been using spaced repetition for 10. And I switched over to SuperMemo from Anki 3 or 4 years ago, full time.
Full time?
Yes, so I originally I ported my collection over, and I did a little bit of things in Anki and a little bit in SuperMemo, but later on I just switched it entirely to SuperMemo.
Ah, okay. So you mean that you only use SuperMemo now?
Yes.
Not that you dedicate full time on free learning.
What'd you say?
Not that you are investing full time on free learning.
No.
Yeah.
I actually so last year, from I would say July or August until the beginning of this year, probably last month, I was basically free learning and working on my own projects and freelancing every now and then, but the amount of work that I had actually do was not much. So this was like my first creative vacation, you could say, or mini retirement, however you want to define it.
Creative
Lasted
vocation.
about 6
I like
months.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will borrow that expression. Creative. Okay, so I think it's a good idea to start more or less chronologically.
Sure.
So I know you were born and raised in USA.
Yes.
So you attended, I think, public school there.
Yes, I attended a public high school. From preschool until middle school, I went to entirely private schools. So it was like religious-based schools.
Religious.
Yes.
Okay, that's because of your parents had religious beliefs?
Yes.
Okay. And in high school, you changed the public system?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Because it was you choose that?
So I think that I moved a lot when I was young. So I used to move about every 3 years, from when I was in second grade until high school. So I would switch schools like maybe every year or two. So I went to, if I remember, I went to 5 or 6 schools before high school.
Wow.
And then in high school we moved again. I was living in Texas for a long time. And in high school I moved to Tennessee and did all of my high schooling around Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, the capital. Okay. So you changed the schools because you changed where you were living.
Yes.
So that was the reason of changing the schools.
Yes, I think too. At that point in time, I think my dad wanted to make sure that I had I guess more of a Christian base, a Protestant Christian base early on, and then once I got to high school, I guess he felt that I was good to go. So
okay.
I could just go to public high school, and then I think he thought too it would be easier for me to get used to being with people who were educated in the public school system if I was going to go off to college, since I was going to have to intermingle with all kinds of people anyways. That was his thought.
So when you were in high school, your parents also had in mind college already?
Yes. It was already assumed that I was going to go to college from when I was very young.
And you didn't
No,
end
no,
up in
no.
college.
No.
How is that?
So by the time I was done with high school, I knew that I was done with school. I did not want to go to school anymore. I had felt that although I had some good experiences with friends, that I wanted to really learn something or really do something. I didn't want to just go to school, and I was okay at school. I was not. It was school. School was not super hard for me. Just kind of like I don't know. Some of it was random. Some classes were harder than others, but most of the time I had pretty good luck in school, I would say. But I just felt that I wasn't really doing much, and I was kind of just staying in place. I was kind of grinding my wheels or spinning my wheels and staying in place. So I wanted to learn a skill, and also I wanted to get out and do something else and work. And so there was a recruiter, a Navy recruiter, who came to my school, and I had a friend who was like, "Hey, Tyler, give me some," because they give away free stuff in order to recruit you. He's like, "Hey, give me some free stuff," and I was like, "Okay, dude, I'll get you a free water bottle or whatever." And so I went over, and I always say that I got a free water bottle and I gave them a contract. I got a free water bottle and a contract.
Wow,
That's kind of how it worked out. Yeah.
But
So
it's not
I
very
came to
expensive.
Navy.
So having a free water bottle, it's not that a great deal.
It was a horrible deal. The water bottle leaked. It was terrible. It was very bad. Very poor. Yeah, it was very poor trade.
But they contacted you when you were still in high school. You didn't
Yeah,
finish
so
yet.
no. Recruiters will come into the school. Like they will have these stands in the school, and colleges do too a little bit, but mostly military people. They'll come in and they'll just recruit. Yeah.
But you finished high school, right? Before joining. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I graduated.
Are you good? Okay. Do you think it was a good decision to skip college and join the military service?
I think it was a good decision to skip college. For me at that time, I think that I delayed, well, yeah, I delayed my own independence by 6 years because I signed for 6 years when I signed. That was my first contract. So it was hard for me to adjust being on my own, like actually on my own without a system supporting me by the time I was done with the military and not having to be on a set schedule. But I think that if I would have gone to college, I probably would have not known what I wanted to do even more. And I would also be paying tons of money to the college. So I had three goals when I went in the military. I wanted to learn a skill, which my job rating, because when you sign a contract, you can sign your rating. I signed to be a Chinese linguist, so I knew I was going to learn Chinese. I wanted to save money, and I did want to get money for college too, because they also have like a program to where they'll pay for your college. So I haven't even used that yet, but I did not want to go into debt. So I kind of accomplished those three things going in.
Oh, so it's like killing three birds with one stone.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
Yes, that was the idea.
So you said that the expertise, I don't know what the word you said exactly. The expertise in the military was linguistic, to be a linguistic,
Yes, it was a Chinese linguist.
Chinese linguistic. So first, I didn't know there was such a thing in the military, so specific. And how that came out is, did you achieve the goal of learning Chinese?
Yeah. So when I first went, they send you to this basically training school for most of the what they consider basic or necessary or needs of the military languages. They'll send you to a school in California, and for some of the languages that they say the distance between the linguistic systems, so like between English as a native language and this language, the further the distance, the longer the class is. So for languages like Arabic, Chinese, Korean, and others, it's 63 weeks of school, and it's all day, or it's 8 hours a day, and you do it 5 days a week.
Wow.
And then depending on, like, the closer the language is to English, you go to less, you go to less schooling.
You said 8 hours a day of school?
Yes. So it's like high school, but only for this language.
So this means you received 8 hours a day of Chinese language classes, lectures.
Yes. Well, yes. Most of them were lectures. Yes.
Wow, so this is not including the homework or all the other stuff you do on your own.
No, that does not include that. No.
Wow, that's really full time. And this, you said 60 something weeks. This is a year and a half or something like that.
Yes.
Wow. And this, what level of proficiency you reach with all this time and schooling?
So I could probably understand 70 or 80% of most materials I would read or listen to after that year and a half, but the average is not that result from the school. So from early on, I was very fortunate that I really wanted to learn Chinese really well. And so I didn't do what my teachers told me to only. And in fact, most of the time I didn't do what they told me. And because my results were good, though, I had a great teaching staff. Because my results were good, they did not force their curriculum on me too hard. So I got to a certain point after half a year where I didn't have to do any more homework, which was great. So I would just go home, and I had like Chinese TV, and I had like these little comic books that I bought from a city close by in Chinese, and I would just do that. And then in class they would go through whatever like text they needed to do, and we would talk, and then I would just listen and be there all day. So I had, because I put a lot of pressure on myself and I was getting great results, they gave me a lot of freedom, which I was very lucky for this.
So you could say that you were an outlier. So your classmates didn't have that degree of freedom, relative freedom.
No, they did not. Nope.
Oh, so we could say you are special in this case.
Yes, you could say that, and I think that there is a meme at the school that some people just get languages better than others. But from my experience, I was fortunate that I stumbled on the right methods to learn. And the class methods that they were teaching you that you were supposed to learn were not exactly right. So because I stumbled upon those methods, it was a lot easier for me to learn the language and more direct, rather than using this other way and kind of getting some language proficiency as a byproduct.
Yeah, exactly. So you say, to paraphrase a little what you said, is that is your case not special because you have a higher capacity for language learning. It's because the methods you used. So if your classmates use the same methodology, they will be in the same place as you.
200%. Because later on, I found someone who had even better methods, and he was twice as good as I was during that time. So, like, because all of the curriculum and like the tests and things like that were pretty standard. And so, talking to him, because we both went through this program, and you're in this all the time. Like, it's kind of like if you're in the same high school. Like, you kind of, if you're in the same major in the same college, like you kind of know what people are doing, and there's teachers and stuff. So I talked to him, and his results were way better than mine because he had way better methods. So, and later on, I kind of was able to adopt some of the methods that he had. I kind of found them independently, but once we met up and talked, I realized that we were doing the same type of thing. He was just further along on the journey.
So can you elaborate on how the methodology is in the military? Or it's the same as in normal school?
It's the same as in normal school. You know, it was one of the big things that I personally took issue with that I think helped me a lot was they went through pronunciation very quickly, pronunciation and tones very quickly. So for Mandarin Chinese, there are 4 basic tones, and there's technically 5 because there's one that's like they call it
the neutral tone, right?
Yeah, the natural tone. And so, so that's fine, and people know that. But there is a skill of being able to hear a word and knowing what the tones are, right? So if I hear a word, I know what the tones are. And it also changes because they didn't actually teach this explicitly, but I found out later. It changes where if you put different tones of words together, or like 6 words together, sometimes they'll sound even different. So the tones will change. Even though the word is this, if you put these together, it changes and it sounds different, right? So they spent like 3 or 4 days on that explicitly. And then the rest of the time was like, okay, now we're going to move on to vocabulary and characters, and the rest you just have to handle yourself. Like they were trying to make it like very, they were trying to compress the time spent on this aspect of the language where it was so foundational. And I was so lucky that I encountered a tutor outside of school who told me like, hey, no one does this. You need to master this. No one masters this. And I kind of had a sense that this is important. So I was able to kind of get this foundation that most of the people struggled with for the rest of forever, because I didn't have it. It wasn't, this lack of skill did not turn into a giant gap in my foundation that would lead me to misunderstanding and mislearning tons of stuff. So I was very, very lucky in this aspect.
So why you think the phonetics are so reduced in the curriculum? It's because it's not that needed in the military? Or what?
I think you said why wasn't it focused on?
Yep. So the military is using a curriculum, right?
Yes.
For learning Chinese. So why do you think they weight so less the phonetics?
So they believe in something that I think is a language learning concept or a theory. I'm not quite sure because I'm out of this field now technically. So it's the communicative theory. Like as long as you can communicate and be understood, you're fine. So pronunciation doesn't matter and things like that. So this is potentially true. However, what I found with Chinese specifically, if you know the correct pronunciation, you also know how to hear the correct pronunciation, right? Like that kind of can go hand in hand. And so for me, I spent a month, and I think even my first couple tests, my grades were bad because I didn't study that stuff, or I half studied that stuff. I spent months, I spent like a month, maybe like 6 weeks with this tutor outside of school, mastering pronunciation and mastering also hearing and knowing what tones the word were. And so because of that, I feel like even though it took me longer to start and make this base, I was able to shoot up really fast afterwards because I did not have to be afraid that I was saying or hearing things wrong. And so I'm not sure if there are parallels in another language or other languages, but because of this overarching communicative theory over perfect pronunciation, it helped me a lot in this instance.
So that's why, not at the beginning, but later on, you had success on tests, even though you were not relying on their methodology and homework and so on.
Yeah, that was probably the first thing where I differed from the curriculum. And then there were some other habits later.
So I'm kind of surprised because my expectation from the USA military is that they are very strict. The rules are very strict. So having this degree of freedom is kind of unexpected.
So the way that they do the school, because the school is very stressful. If you don't pass the school, you lose your job. You don't get this job anymore. You don't know where you're going to end up. So if you don't pass through a language, they will do something called re-rate you. At least that's what it used to be called. I think it was called re-rating. And they would send you off to do some other job. It could be, I was in the Navy, right? It could be chipping paint on a boat. It could be, sitting on a submarine somewhere. It could be, which some people, there's nothing wrong with that. And these are good jobs that a lot of solid people do. I think it's the idea that you failed at this. And then also it's like, and it's so unknown that everyone's scared of it because you don't know what you're getting, right? So I think that they use this as this, it's almost like what is it? Isn't there like a Greek or Roman, like there's like a dagger that's sitting over their head or something like that? I don't, there's like some Greek myth or some historical event. It's basically like you constantly feel like you're under this pressure. There's this giant weight of, oh, if I fail and don't do well, I will get kicked out and I don't know what's going to happen to me. And I think that because of that, they afford you a little more, a little less stress. So we still did military stuff. We wore uniforms every day. They would check them. We would stand watch and things like that and get that type of training. But I think in this type of intensive environment, they slacken the rules a bit. So it's not quite like being on a ship or somewhere where discipline in military-wise is super high.
Yeah, okay. Because when you were learning Chinese, you were not actually in a boat. You were in land, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the school is on land, yes.
Okay, so where is that transition? Because if you serve the Navy, at some point, I guess you are on a boat.
It depends. It depends on your job, and it depends on what the needs are. So some jobs are always, or most of the time, on a boat. For linguists, for linguists, sometimes there's some jobs that are on a boat or submarines. I had some friends who became submariners, which was they're very hardy people, and it was definitely it was challenging. To me, it seems like it would be challenging, but they adapted really well. And then also some people stayed on shore, and then some people went on ships. So it depends on what the Navy needs at what time. And so in this particular instance, for the schooling, a lot of the schooling is done in the States on land.
Oh, exactly. So, for instance, what you said is now they have the need of cleaning one. I know how you said the job of cleaning one boat or one task that no one wants to do it, right?
Maybe, yeah.
So, now I got it. So if you fail at whatever you are doing on the Navy, you are regraded to that back-end job, more or less.
Yes. Or because the one that we talked about, shipping paint, I think that was used as a threat because that's been stuck in my head. But I feel like some of our superiors might have used that as a threat. There was a status where they could just send you and not give you any job, right? So if you fail, it's so unknown. They can either get you a new job and you go to another school, or they give you no job and then you just go wherever you're needed and you don't have a job. And in that situation, you'll end up doing work that no one else wants to do or is slated to do. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess that for the Chinese learners, they have the pressure to succeed in the exam.
Yes.
So, okay, so and I think the mentality, it's the other way. It's not succeeding, it's not failing at the exam.
Yes.
Which is not the same.
Yes.
And also it's not the same as learning Chinese, because you can pass the exams without actually learning, being proficient in the language. I don't know if that's actually the case.
You need a basic proficiency because the exams were definitely structured around you knowing what's being said. But you did not need full proficiency. Like, for example, it was not translate exactly what they're saying. It was more, they said, what did they list in this speech? Or so they would ask purposefully vague questions in order to try to test comprehension. To be honest, like structuring or creating those tests is a whole nother monster, and it's very hard to do to test proficiency. But my thought was, because I wanted to learn Chinese, I did not just want to pass these tests. My thought was, well, if I'm really good at Chinese, I won't have to worry about these tests. Like being good at Chinese encompassed these tests. So these tests is only a certain knowledge set or a certain proficiency. If I can get so good that I understand everything, then these tests has got to be easy. And so I went with that goal from the beginning.
And you succeeded.
Yes, pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then what happened when you finished? So you say you graduated from
Yes.
The Chinese.
After I graduated, I went to my next base of operation, which was in Hawaii, and I started to just kind of there was some work that they would want me to do, and so I was just kind of working and doing things that were necessary there. And then later on, because I kept learning Chinese though, like I was very focused. So from that time forward, I would basically study all the time. I would study every day, and it was all mostly free learning though. It was mostly me teaching myself and learning. And so then after a couple of years being there, for my last 2 or 3 years, I taught Chinese. So I was a Chinese instructor for the military.
Do you think you got that position as a teacher due to the free learning you did?
Yes, I think that because my Chinese got to a very high level at that point in time, in that time frame, they were willing to let me teach other people. Because there were some people who, maybe took a wrong path, or their teachers weren't as flexible, or they didn't happen to learn the same type of methods that I had. And so me being able to share some of my experiences, I think helped some people. I would like to believe helped some people.
And what's your perspective as a teacher? So you had the experience as a student and as a teacher in the military.
Yes.
So you know both sides of the coin. Do you have any insight of what you felt as a teacher?
Yeah, so I had to stick to a pretty set curriculum, and I did the best that I could. Fortunately, though, the classes that I taught were refresher classes. So even if you're a linguist in the military, you need to take a yearly test to prove your proficiency to keep your job. And so what they usually do is right before you take that test, they'll send you to a yearly refresher for anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks usually. And so I taught those refresher classes. So it was a lot. Sometimes those were my old classmates or other people who went through that same program initially in California, and then I would teach them. I would teach their refresher course right before they took their test. And so, being from around the same time frame and from the same curriculum and in the same school, you kind of know people who are around you. So I knew a lot of the people that were in other classes or sister classes for the refreshers that I taught, and they knew me or knew of me. And so I would just do the best that I could to kind of share my experiences and also convince them that it's not like some, supernatural metaphysical gift that allowed me to learn to this proficiency. It's repeatable steps and ideas that they could use to get the same results.
Yeah, that's key. Is because one of the bad school habits acquired is that they believe that they are not good at learning.
Yes.
And you want to communicate that.
Yes, and give them enough freedom to see it, right? So that's another thing too, is try to be as honest as I could, as transparent as I could for what I knew, what I don't know, and an example of this that I would do in class is because a lot of times I would use native materials, which are supposed to be more difficult. They're not curated for a student, but to be honest, if the goal is to learn the language, you need to eventually get used to the materials or the language materials that native speakers use and communicate. And so there were times, and I loved this, where I knew a couple teachers who used these materials, and they would be very worried. And usually they were the native speakers, but they were very worried, like, oh, I don't know what the English word for this Chinese word is. I have to know every single English word in this article for the Chinese word, because what if they ask me a question? I have to let them feel that I know the answer. And at least from my perspective, I did not need to do that. Because I knew the majority of them and I could give more examples, but if there were some words I didn't know, I could just teach them how to look up the meaning of the word so they know how to do it when they're reading the article in the future.
Yeah.
So
what you said is that those teachers had a fear of looking foolish in front of their students. This student doesn't know that particular word in English or whatever. Because they had to fear as students as well when they were being tested.
Yes.
And you had no fear at all in that sense.
I would say that I felt nervous. Well, I tried to view it as excitement, but at the time I was nervous. I felt nervous, but I knew ultimately it was better for them because, so this was my first experience with kind of in-system, out-of-system type of thinking. When I say system, I mean like education system, school system, that type. So I knew that because I was able to use some of these methods, and I became even more educated on some of deeper methods like this, or more broad methods, that the most important thing for them was exposure to the language and continuous exposure to the language. And most of the students, to be honest, most of the other sailors and military service members would spend most of the year not knowing Chinese, and they would go to this refresher course, or not doing Chinese. They would go to this refresher course, and then they would take their test. Because most of the jobs that they did, they only used a small fraction of the language. I don't know exactly what the content of their job was, but they would tell me that they just used such a small sliver because they're doing some translation somewhere. And so I knew that if they needed exposure to the language no matter what it was. And so my goal really was, one, to kind of capture their interest, hopefully, again, so they do this because they have to do it outside of work, right? They do this outside of work. And two, to let them realize how and that they can, right? And that those are the two, my main goals in class. And so, yeah, we do curriculum stuff, but I also try to show them stuff that they thought was funny, or show them some goofy videos, or even show them what I was reading or looking at, or resources, right? That was a big thing for me. And so, and in fact, we had some, because it was me and a couple other people who'd been through the system and done well that were non-native speakers that we kind of were able to kind of push this forward. And later on, we started to get, like, our students would tell us their test results, and we were getting good results too, because their language was getting better. Their language ability was getting better, so their test was getting better. That theory was proven. And so once that kind of was solidified in my mind, I was like, oh, this is how we're going to go forward the whole time. So it doesn't matter if I knew what this word or not. It doesn't matter if anyone knew what the word is, as long as they are, because different people will remember and forget different words. So it was very important for them just to get exposed and to get as much exposure as they could.
Exactly. And you said something related to work, is that do some classmates or students, or when you were a teacher, were understanding learning Chinese as a job?
Yeah, so they were technically Chinese linguists, so they were doing some type of translation or interpretation. I'm not quite sure, but that was their job. And so, but they were, in a sense, they were overtrained, right? They trained the students from their accounts. They trained them very broad and would test them on very broad Chinese, but depending on what area they were in, they would use only a sliver. So, of course, general Chinese proficiency is very helpful, but a lot of times you could get very, very good at the job and your Chinese would only be the sliver. But if you would test and fail the test, you can't do your job. You're not allowed to do your job anymore. So the requirements were much, much more than what you actually had to use.
Yeah, but you constantly had this pressure because even if you succeed in the exam, next year you have to repeat everything once again.
Yes.
So the fear of losing the job is permanent in the military.
Unless you get so good at Chinese, it doesn't matter. You know you can't fail, right? Because the test is fairly consistent. It doesn't stay the exact same, but it's fairly consistent. So, I mean, if you could get if you could find some way to save all the test questions, but none of us had the test questions because it was through like a central organization that was somewhere. I don't even know where it is. It was done online. But either you got really good at Chinese to where the test was easy, then you would never have to think about it again, right? That's another option, right? Is to get so good at Chinese that
the standardized test was good enough. So people who doesn't cram, they just learn the language, they can pass that exam.
Yes, you could say that. If you were really, really good at Chinese, the test would not be that hard. Yeah.
Okay, so if a native speaker tries his test, he will get a high score.
If their English is good enough.
Oh, okay, because it's pairing with
English. Yeah.
The questions
are in English. Yes.
Oh, the questions are in English.
Texts are in Chinese, right? So all the test content is in Chinese. So listening and reading, and the questions are in English. Yes.
Oh, I assume the questions will be in Chinese as well.
No, because they want you to be able to translate, right? Yeah. So you do have to have a little bit of both. Yeah.
Okay. And due to that pressure, did you have students that tried to cheat at the exam?
Yes, but I think so. I don't know how though, because in order to memorize or get the answers for the questions, you had to be good enough at Chinese to know what the answers would be, right? So it is kind of, because there were multiple tests and they didn't share all of the test bank. So for example, I would take the test because you could choose to take the test every 6 months. So I would take the test every 6 months just to see, because there was an advanced test too that was not mandatory, but you could potentially earn money by doing well at that test. So I would take that test a lot. And you always had to take the initial test. So I saw the test maybe, in my 6 years, I probably saw the test 10 times, 8 times or 10 times. And there was overlap, right? So there were questions that I would remember or passages that I would remember for sure. But if you didn't understand it to that level, and you couldn't take notes in or out, right? So you couldn't write down notes and take it out with you. So unless you could find some way to memorize the whole test, which is probably possible, but it was like a 2 or 3 hour test, so it would be hard, and most of the time you were fried by the time you're done because you had to focus for so long. So if you could find a way to do it, you could cheat, but it'd be very hard to cheat. And I think if you got caught cheating, the consequences were really, really bad, but I don't remember what they were.
Yeah, but one of the easiest solution is just copying from a classmate. I don't know the answer, but I will look for that person, what he has written.
Yes,
and
so
copy
it was
that.
all on computer, and they might have different questions.
Oh, it's
You could,
computer based.
yeah,
Okay.
but you'd have to be so good that you could look over and see that they're on the exact same question, right? And see that it's the exact same question as you by random chance, and then also look at their answer.
It's computer based, so you can also cheat in a technical level. I don't know if you had access to the internet
No,
or a local, how it's called, a local dictionary via pen drive, whatever. I don't know.
nope, no,
Nope.
no.
Okay.
It was like it was only running this program, and I don't even know what it was. It was all proprietary. I don't even know how they did it. Yeah.
Okay. So cheating is hard, yet it doesn't stop students to try.
Yeah. I think there were people who tried, and punishments were really severe, but I forgot what they were. Yeah.
Well, I guess punishment in military, I can imagine how that feels. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and when you finished, sorry, so all the time you were in the military, you were a teacher, or sometime you ended teaching?
So from the time I ended my military stint as a teacher, but I did not teach the whole time. I should say that. So about 3 or 4 years into my military career, I became a teacher, and then I taught for the rest of the time.
Did you like the experience of being a teacher?
I did. I thought it was fun. I liked the experience of sharing my passion at the time with the students. And I had some really great students that were very nice to me. And they were very good people.
Even with some restrictions, as following a curriculum, you still the big picture
Yes.
is still positive.
Yes, and because the curriculum was limiting for sure, but we could change. I mean, we were given a lot of leeway in our class most of the time, and we got good results. So I think the administrators at that school were very hands off with us because they knew whatever we were doing was working, which I was very appreciative of. Yeah, I was very appreciative of that.
And once you acquired language proficiency, did you use the Chinese in the military? Outside of just teaching, have you used it for what was intended to do? So you were trained to learn the language, but not for the purpose of teaching it afterwards, right?
Yes.
So-
I was able to interpret. There was the only time I really used it was for the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard at some point in time, they had a shared exercise with some Chinese, I think it was their Coast Guard, maybe. They came to Hawaii and they had an exercise. And so I was able to do it for like 2 or 3 days. But besides that, no. I mean, most of my friends were Chinese or Taiwanese in Hawaii. So most of my friends that I would hang out with were Chinese or Taiwanese. But I did not actually do the translation work, no.
So that's unexpected. So all the year and a half of training, that's because that was your decision, or they put you as a teacher because you were good at and they needed that position.
Yeah, there were a few competing circumstances that kind of led to that. Yeah, some of my friends and things like that I had to, they did not want me to work in specific jobs because of that, because of how many Chinese nationals I knew, or Taiwanese nationals I knew. But I was fortunate that later on they allowed me to go teach, and I was able to use kind of what I'd spent so much time on.
Nice. So, and you said you signed a 6 years contract. So what happened when that day came?
It was the best day of my life.
But,
Yeah. That day was the second best day of my life. The best day of my life was the morning after, when I woke up and thought I was late to muster and realized that I was free.
Yeah. So you didn't wanted to keep teaching Chinese in the military, or you wanted to go outside of the military overall?
So I think the biggest challenge with the military is that I found, and there's a lot of I have a lot of respect and admiration for people who can deal with it. Is you never know what's going to be next. So I was a Chinese teacher for 2 or 3 years in the military, but once that 3 years was up, I don't know what would have happened to me. There is a randomness, like they'll assign you somewhere else and you don't know what's going to happen. So I did not have a job of Chinese teacher. I had a job of Chinese English, an official job of Chinese linguist, but I just so happened to be able to be a teacher. And so what would have happened next, I don't know. And for me, I wanted freedom early on, and I knew early on, for all the great people that I met in the military, you definitely sacrifice a lot of freedom to be in. Time freedom, location freedom. They kind of own you at a higher degree than a country owns its citizens.
So you didn't choose.
I didn't want that.
Yeah. So you didn't choose when to sleep, when to eat, and this kind of mundane tasks.
We were given more choices, like on shore. Well, on shore you were given these choices. If I would have been on a ship, I would not have had those choices. No. But when I was on shore, it was a little more lax. It was more like a day job, but they could call you at a drop of a hat and you'd have to go. So that could happen anytime. It could happen all the time. Yeah.
Okay. So you decided to end the contract. So the contract expires and not to renew.
Yes.
The contract.
Yes.
And you were free.
Yes, I was free.
And what you did afterwards?
So after that, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I kind of wasted some time, just kind of hung out. I was still in Hawaii for a bit. I transferred some of my stuff to back home. And I went to Taiwan with some friends. And I stayed in Taiwan that was the first time I went just as like a trip. And so I stayed in Taiwan for about a month and a half or 2 months the first time. And it was during that time, one of my mentors from the military, someone who I was pretty close to, who got out like 2 years before I did, he was like, hey, you might want to check out tech and programming. I know you liked languages and you like to study and things. You might be interested in this. And so it was like a Facebook message. And so I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And then when I went back to Hawaii from Taiwan, I signed up for a very quick, like a 3-month boot camp that was just kind of starting at the time to learn how to program.
So something not related to what you were doing until then.
Yeah.
And going back to military, you said that there were 3 goals. One is not getting a debt. So you had like a wild card to go to college after the military, right? Without paying the actual fees.
Yeah, I still have that wild card.
It is still it doesn't have an expiration date.
So it did. I think that was changed, like in the past presidency before Biden was elected. I don't know what the status is now, but I think it has not expired yet.
Oh, so you still have the option to go to college for free? Well, for free. The government the army covers the fees.
Yeah, they'll pay tuition. Yeah.
Tuition fees.
They give you a stipend. They give you some money too each month to live.
And how's that even if you have it for free, you still didn't use it? You don't go to college?
Yeah, I don't know if I could go back to school. I think about it and I toy with the idea every month or two. I'm like, I should go back to college and do this, but I don't know. I don't know what I would use it for, to be honest.
I was leading to that point. Is that, do you think you need college?
No.
Because you are in tech already, so your work. You are also you are building up a startup. So you don't actually. You don't actually need a college degree.
No. If you're going, for anyone here out there who is interested in tech, if you have done work and have self-studied and have projects you can show, you can get a job College definitely helps you get a more high-paying job because it puts you through the pipeline. There is like a pipeline for a lot of large tech companies, but you can also go through that yourself. Most of the time, if you have some experience, they'll look and let you try to go work at there and interview you. I've thought about going into college to work on some, like, I don't even know, get a specialization or maybe a graduate degree. But for me to get a graduate degree, I have to get a bachelor's degree, and a lot of times in a similar field, especially one that's more math intensive. And I just don't know if I could put up with that anymore. I don't know if I could go to college and sit in class and be graded and everything like that, now that I've spent so much time learning on my own and know that I can do it on my own.
Exactly. Now that you are a free learner, college doesn't look that shiny.
No, not at all.
Do you think that it's because the path you have chosen, because it's tech, or that could be it's independent on if you have chosen any other topic?
Maybe math. If I wanted to be a mathematician, I think, or maybe accounting. No, probably not accounting. Anything that interacts closely with business, I think that you can find a way in. It might not be an easy way, and it might not be a quick way, but if you can prove that you have certain skills and you can prove it to a company and you've done it in a company and you're a professional, you can find a way into better companies. I think if you want to do more research, even if you already have credentials, and I could be wrong, I've wanted to get into a research type position in the past and haven't been even given an interview. So I think that there is some credentialism that gets into play when it comes into research. But for most things, in my experience, you don't need it.
Yeah. So you're saying because research is more institutionalized, so you need the credentials, certificates, and this kind of thing. But when
You
it's
could also
business,
make something very important and get really famous. I think if you get really famous and you make something that's very important that everyone's looking at, then you will also get that opportunity.
and then I have a question: is if you were already and you had experience of being a Chinese teacher, how come when you were in Taiwan you didn't go for this path of being an English teacher for Chinese learners? I mean, I said that wrong. So you were a Chinese teacher for English natives.
Yes.
How come you didn't do the other way out on Taiwan to teach English to Chinese people?
So I have some. I've been fortunate to. There were periods of time when I first moved where, like, I was in between jobs or something like that, and I would do that. I've noticed that even and I only would teach adults, really. It was more like tutoring. But I realized that the institutions, even here, that rely on or that want to teach English, a lot of it is just like more schooling for people, and a lot of it is just like they want you to rely on the system, so you keep coming back and paying money. To be honest, as a language instructor, and like, so for example, I'm teaching a couple of my friends here, my Taiwanese friends here, for free, just because it will help them to learn English. But I'm doing the same thing that I did when I taught Chinese. I'm showing them resources. We're going through. I'm making sure. So because they, in my mind, because they pushed quickly through the English system when they were kids and they were taught certain pronunciation things wrong, I'm correcting their pronunciation. I'm making sure they can hear the right things, like, because sometimes they'll hear things differently because they never were taught right through the curriculum, and they haven't done enough native material. So I'm doing these things, but my ultimate goal is to not teach. Like, the ultimate goal of language instruction in my mind is, even if I'm guiding you through, and in fact, there's a phrase in Chinese that says this, like, the master can only bring you through the door, but actually continuing on the path is up to you, right? And so when I'm teaching these students, I'm going through these materials with them, but ultimately I want to get to a point to where their English will keep improving when I'm gone, because to be honest, like they don't need me to learn English. They can learn English on their own. I just want
Exactly.
to show them better ways to look at it and better ways to think about it.
Okay, it's more like a facilitator, a mentor, or tutor of free learning.
Yes.
It's you can. I will teach you, quote quote, teach you how you can teach yourself English.
Yes.
Nice, nice. And you do this absolutely for free on your
Yeah.
people you know.
Yes, I mean, as especially with this period of my life, you know, I there's a really close family friends of our family and their family, and I know it could really help them. And so, since it really helps them, since we're here, and I don't know how long we're going to be here, I'd like to help them as much as I can, and at least get to the point where by the time I go home, they can keep going on their own.
Are you familiar with the expression of learning in public?
I think I am. Yeah, I think I am.
Okay, because if you do this, you share this with the world over the internet, you can reach more people. Because I guess there are so many people that want to learn a language, for instance, Chinese, not necessarily English natives.
Yes.
And you can help of providing resources because you're an example that this is possible.
Yes.
Because you could say, oh, watching movies or TV, this is a waste of time. I won't learn with this. It's more or less the built-in mentality. So I think
For yes, yes.
what's needed is more examples like you. So if I Google this, I can look. Oh, there's people who did that. Examples of
Yeah.
people learning in public, because now you're doing it already, but it's more local on your environment, your surroundings.
Yes. Yes.
Have you ever tried? Because I think you used to have a blog.
Yeah, so I still do have a blog. It changed. I used to have a Medium blog. Now I just have a blog at my website, tylerbowright.com.
Okay.
But I, because I have a lot of things on my plate, I write every day, but I publish only every so often. So my rate of production is slow. When it comes to learning languages, the reason that I haven't gone into it too much is there are a lot of great resources out there. One of the main ones, there's a lot of good examples, and I think that me being an example is not bad, but I do think that if you really look up, I guess you have to dig in kind of deep, but there are some good examples like antimoon.com, if you've ever seen that. There's alljapaneseallthetime.com, AJATT, which is an example of someone who taught himself Japanese with no school, period. And it's a good example. That's where I learned a lot of my methodology later on, is from that. There's some marketing on there and things like that, but to be honest, if you just follow the mentality and don't purchase the programs, you can also go really far. So I think that when it comes to I'm definitely continuing to publish things on my blog, but when it comes to the language learning area, I think I'm fine as an example, and I would love to show people and share. But at the same time, I think that my focus isn't there now. So it's less. I would be less learning in public there. It'd be like a small fraction of kind of what I'm trying to push.
Okay.
Yeah.
But even though you agree on the mentality, the methodology of sharing.
Yes. Oh, yes. So something that's kind of come to me as I've continued to learn new things is that the institutionalized methods are most of the time not the best methods. And they usually lag behind things that are really good. But a lot of times it's hard to get any publicity if you are not associated with a specific company or a specific institution or things like that. So there's a lot of really awesome, incredibly smart, basically geniuses out there. But some of them don't actually publish anything, which sucks because we don't get to see it. And then, or maybe they don't have that habit or don't think they have something to share. But I guess the collection or a wide range of human experience put out, especially people who are doing things or learning really well, is very important. And I think in the future that hopefully more people will share and have a blog or videos or things like that to share with people.
Yeah. Yeah, for instance, because you said that you take a great deal of learning all the time, I think you said.
All Japanese,
All Japanese all the time. So if you didn't have that resource, you didn't have the same experience later on self-learning, at least
Absolutely.
for acquiring those ideas, right? So the
Absolutely.
point I want to reach is the more people who shares what they did learn by themselves, the more resources other people will have. That doesn't mean
Yes.
they will use it, but at least it's available. There's something to look for.
Yes.
And I think Chinese is one of the languages that is broadly studied for foreigners as a second language. And Chinese is especially difficult, same as Japanese. But if you learn it semantically with the usual way, it's very hard. Because, for instance, if I look at the Wikipedia about a Chinese test to get the citizenship or this kind of thing, they will tell you the requirement is about 2,000 hours of classroom. What measurement is that? Sitting listening to one guy 2,000 hours won't get me the proficiency of this level. It's still so wrong. And if I am one person Googling, I will end up in Wikipedia. And what I will see is I need 2,000 hours of classroom. And I will spend a lot of money going to a private academy to learn Chinese, which is what you said, it's almost always a bad approach.
Yes.
So what we need is resources of the other way,
Yes.
the good way, the self-directed, self-learned, self-paced, whatever you want to put here, learning.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry if I built up too long the topic.
Oh no. No, and it's true
Yeah.
for everything, right? So, and my big thing now is I would share with my incremental learning blogging that I do now. Mostly, I'm sharing my experiences with like programming or computer science type stuff, which is something that traditionally has been very entrenched in academics, right? Like you have to go to college. Like, oh, this guy went to MIT, and then because it's a very new field, so most people who have been in the field and have been doing great work have not been self-taught, or if they are self-taught, they're not as famous as other ways, or maybe there's not as many blogs that are shared. Not 100%. Like there are people like Paul Graham, like the guy who made Yahoo sites, and some people who became famous and became rich in Silicon Valley, who get a lot of airtime, but there are not as many blogs of people who document their approach to self-learning and getting into the industry. And I definitely think that there is a very big need for that. I think there's more and more people who are talking about it, but I guess it just not enough time has gone by to where that seems possible. But to be honest, the language learning space, there's a lot of people in it. I mean, even some people like Matt versus Japan on YouTube and stuff like that. And from my experience, when it comes to learning a language, I think yes, Chinese has its own idiosyncrasies, but if you can learn a language, you can learn another language. Like the challenge is different, but the process, it seems, is very similar because humans we learn languages. Like that's one of our basic instinctual abilities. It's not outside of our capabilities. So yeah,
Exactly.
That's kind of why I haven't focused too much. Yeah.
Okay. Now you focus on programming, and all programming is self-taught.
Yes, I went to a 3-month boot camp where we worked on projects and I interacted with more facilitators. Like it wasn't like very strict curriculum. It was a lot of project-based things where we worked on our own. But everything else, yes, it's self-taught through people. So blogs, coworkers,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. It's all been me just doing it and learning that way. But Wikipedia, that kind of thing.
Nice. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Because now you work on tech, so you now work on what you studied by yourself, learn by yourself.
Yes.
That's why you don't need college at this point of life.
Yes. Yes. For sure. If I wanted to be a college professor in the future, I'm sure I'd have to go to college. But for now, for the projects that I work on and even learning new technologies and techniques, I haven't needed it, no.
So if you will go back to a point of time you were a high schooler, will you choose the same path as you did?
Would I know what I know now?
Yes. Now, if you are a high schooler again, will you join the Navy, study Chinese there, and so on?
Yeah, if I was me right now and I
Yeah.
went back into high school, I do not think that I would take the same path. But the reason is because I already have the experience and prior knowledge to do this independently. Yeah. So I think there is the risk that I would not have caught on or known about free learning at this point if I did not go to the Navy and need to learn Chinese because I wanted to get good at it. But if I would go back in time, I would probably not. I would probably start trying to work in high school, right? My interests were the same. I'd probably start trying to at least do some type of technical work or things like that. And I would probably go to, I would try to find a way to give myself as much free time as possible. And at that point in time, I did not have that option. So I was either going to go to the Navy or go to college, or I was probably going to be, I was told I needed to move out if I did not do those things. So I would have had to figure something else out.
So you won't repeat that, but you will do it for the sake of discovering free learning, because you needed those. So you think, based on your case, you wouldn't have learned about the existence of free learning?
Oh yes.
You think it's that? Sorry, do you think it's that niche that you won't get the exposure to what free learning is in your lifetime?
So I can't make that estimate for my lifetime, because hopefully that it'll blow up in the next few years and everyone will catch on. I think I would have run the risk of not encountering it when I encountered it. And I had a lot of limiting beliefs and issues that I had to work on in myself to even get to where I can appreciate free learning today, how I do. And so my early discovery of spaced repetition and my need to really learn something well was, as Chinese, I actually know, like, not pass a test like once, but for me to know this long term. My need of that and me struggling to do that before spaced repetition and free learning. And before understanding free learning through spaced repetition, I should say. My struggle to do that enabled me to realize how critical, or how, I guess, fundamental some of the concepts were before I encountered them, like, explicitly written out. Yeah. So I had the problem first, and I had really bad solutions of the problem. And then a better solution came onto this problem, and so then I used that. And then I read more blogs and found another solution, even better solution, and kept going down that path to get to where I got to today. So I had to go through that path and the struggle in order to appreciate it. If I would not have gone through that path, or if I would just went to college, that might not have happened. I'm pretty sure it would have at least taken me longer.
So the point is that you never had the goal of free learning. You just end up discovering free learning as a remedy, as a getting a better solution.
Yes.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you want to add something more that I haven't asked?
Yeah, I think so. I never had a feeling of being stupid in my life, or having been told that I couldn't learn, or having been told that I was slow, or things like that. But through kind of the experience, and in fact, as we talked about, when I was learning Chinese, because I stumbled on some better methods, I was considered super smart. My teachers would be like, "Oh, he's this type of, like, crazy supernatural being, almost, like, not 100%, but just like, oh, look how great he is. Like, he's smarter. He gets this better." Some people were like, "Oh, he used to be a Chinese in another life, like in his past life." But the important part is that was only in comparison, right? So the reason that was, it was because of, compared to what other people were doing in this system, I was using better methods that just so happened to not be in the system. It was not something innate inside of myself. So if there are people who feel stupid or they can't learn, or, in comparison with depressed, in comparison with other people, they feel like they don't have, they can't do, they don't live up to them. Like, I think that the biggest harm, like that, those feelings are legitimate, but I think a lot of times those feelings have been created, or those have been manufactured because people compare themselves to the system, or these comparisons to people in the system are put on them. To be honest, most of the geniuses of the world were free learners. I mean, Newton, Leibniz, Einstein, yeah, they were in college and they were college professors, but they were all interested at some point in time, and the reason they pursue that interest outside of school to get there. They didn't get there by being in school. Even Da Vinci and people like that, they didn't even have modern school systems back then. So I think that people who do feel that, or feel that they're not good at anything, I would say that I would hope that these people, instead of writing themselves off as failures, would try to think of it more as they haven't had enough freedom and support and opportunity to really discover and work through things that they like to do, or they can good at. Yeah.
Nice. Such a good insight. So what to paraphrase a little, is these people who are self-learners, is that they follow their learn drive, their curiosity. Yeah. They don't do because it's their job, it's what they do in college or whatever. And that's actually what you did.
Yes.
Once in the military, when you finished the curriculum, you were still learning Chinese by yourself.
Yes. Because
you had this learn drive, because you wanted to. You were genuinely interested in the language, not just passing the examination to keep on the military. You really wanted, yeah. And the other thing you said is that when you compare yourself with the other people, or in the same setting, you tend to degrade yourself. Oh, the other people are better than me, are more intelligent. I'm a failure. I think I don't have the ability to learn a new language. And most likely they end up believing that.
Yes.
That tendency becomes a hardcode fact.
Yes. Well, I think that something that happened to me was in math. Like, I had a couple really bad math class experiences when I changed schools. And I realize now, looking back, it wasn't that I was bad at math. It was that at that current stage in my brain development, that class was not suitable for me. It was not like, it was at the wrong, like I didn't have, because even the way that they teach math, right? So in America, it's like Algebra 1, Algebra 2, or pre-algebra, which doesn't only include algebra. They just kind of throw a curriculum together that they say that it's important and builds off of each other, but it doesn't 100%. So it's like that, and then geometry, and then calculus, which is a totally different concept. So this structure is arbitrary. Like they're like math specifically was arbitrary, and I went from one school where I was doing great in my classes to another school where I was failing all my math classes, and the reason is the book was switched. They switched the order of things that they taught, so they had fundamentals of certain concepts that are linked that I didn't have, and they were asking me to test on these more advanced concepts that need the fundamental concepts that I never learned right. So is that a problem with me? At the time I thought it was, but it wasn't, right? In the same way where I was using Chinese better, or I had a better foundation, so later on in class, I shot way past everyone because I had this foundation that they didn't have, right? That doesn't mean that I'm smarter than them. It doesn't mean that they're stupid. In fact, it's really sad that a lot of them were, they didn't pass, or, some of them thought that they were stupid, or thought that they couldn't learn this because the school will never blame itself, right? That they're going to blame you. You're the responsible one, right? You didn't do this, even if the structure is not efficient, or if it's not right? They're going to blame you. And so that's the reason. I think a lot of people carry that. Even I carried some of that into my life, in my work life, where I felt that I had intrinsic problems because of things that happened at school, because of the system. But just because you're not fitting into that box doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. And there's probably a better way to learn whatever it is you want to learn. And so it's more important for you to follow your interests and really build build the knowledge inside of this interest than it is for you to fit into this curriculum. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I was kind of long-winded, but I feel very strongly about that now.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do you want to add anything else?
No, I'm fine. That's perfect.
Okay, so we will wrap up today's episode here. I would like to thank you for your time. Second episode you share with us. Also keep in mind, you listener, that you can contact us on Discord. The link is in the description. There's no issue if you want to keep privacy, because with Discord it's very easy to keep the privacy. And we're here to help you. We both know both sides of the coin. We went through the same process alone. It just, we do it years before because we are older.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we are on
Their choice.
Yeah. So, if you want to say something to the viewers,
Yes, guys, keep up hope. Definitely, there's people out here now who have been through similar experiences and would like to not see that repeated into the future. So definitely feel free to contact us at the Discord or the resources William mentioned, and yeah.
nice. So, see you next time and stay curious.
Yes.